I'm Nick Hughes, and this is Founders Live Conversations. So hello, everyone. Welcome to Founders Live Conversations. I am Nick Hughes. I am the CEO and founder of Founders Live, and I will post in the chat a little more information if you're not familiar with Founders Live, but we build a global marketplace and community for entrepreneurship. It's all over the world. It's great. We have events that happen regionally and globally around the world, and then we also have our global community. And some of the things that we do is something like this, which is a conversation and interviews with entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs. And today we have Dave Plunkett from BugSplat. Excuse me. We have Dave Plunkett. Dave, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. This is so great. So as we get going here, I also want to thank Galvanize for partnering with us on this. And so before we get to our full conversation with Dave, and obviously questions, Kate's already been posting questions, I want to pull in Alicia from Galvanize to say hi, say some words, and share a little bit more about what's going on with Galvanize.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Dave. Hi, everyone. So we are super happy to be partnering on this event, and I'm very excited to hear what Dave has to say today. For those of you who are new to the Galvanize community, we bring entrepreneurs, students, and companies together under one roof to create a one-of-a-kind ecosystem. We offer co-working spaces, immersive education in software engineering and data science, and enterprise training. Through curated and organic interactions, our members and students are immersed in a stimulating environment that fosters collaboration, innovation, and productivity. We have campuses all over the country. And if you have any questions, you can message me in the chat and I'll send you my email and make sure you get the information that you need. So I'm super excited.
Yes, thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Galvanize, for just being a part of this. Look at this, we almost have 20 people in the room, so this is great. And many of you might be a member of Galvanize or familiar with Galvanize, but we just want to thank you. And so I've posted the link for Galvanize to learn more as well. And Alicia, if anyone's interested, what would be, if you even want to just share like where they should go and who they can reach out to you or whatnot?
Yeah, I will post my email down here and I will make sure that you are connected to the right person.
Perfect. All right, Dave, what's going on? How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nick. Happy to talk with all you folks. I'm amazed there's 20 people tuned into your channel. This is great.
Very good. Yeah, this is gonna be a fun conversation. Founders Live Conversations, we really like to take an authentic and a free-flowing, experience of conversation, pulling out, some of your experience as an entrepreneur, and then we'll wrap in BugSplat and what you're building now. And one thing that we've pointed out here is we would like to really talk about how to really build a unique brand and how to stand out in a market that can be pretty busy sometimes. And I do think branding and building that unique culture and brand is part of that. So we want to talk about that. And then also, we have some questions already here. So I'm going to wrap in Kate's question here fairly early on. But first and foremost, just let's hear a little bit about yourself and even just a bit of a bio and a background on BugSplat.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training. Long ago, I got a degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University and then got lit up when I took a computer graphics course and decided to stay for my master's. And all my graduate work was in computer visualization. And that launched me on a career of software development. I've never worked a single day as a mechanical engineer. I've always been a software developer or in management. And along the way, I married a wonderful woman and we had 2 boys. And we actually started our family here in Colorado and have recently come back after being on the East Coast for a long time. So it's great to be back in the area. You know, in the early days, I think I thought of startups as, you know, you want to be in a startup so that you can own a piece of the action and feel personally invested in the excitement of building something. And the most exciting it can be, in my book anyhow, is when you own a big piece of it, when you're a founder. And so I have worked virtually my whole career in startups. The only time I haven't been in a startup is when my startup got acquired by a bigger company. And that, I think, would be a recurring theme for me, is like, yeah, there might be, for some people, for the lucky few, there might be riches at the end of the journey. But if you can build a company and run it yourself, that is a really exciting place to work. It's, you know, I've been in a lot of different size companies, and I always keep returning to the, you know, the smaller companies, the early companies are the ones where you have the most fun, the most energy, and the most excitement. So that's really what started me on the path.
That's awesome. And on that note, would, you know, your comment of it's just fun to, like, you know, own a major part of the action and all that, but is there another aspect of entrepreneurship that was really attractive to you? What drove you to really become an entrepreneur and want to even own a bunch of that action, if you will?
Well, I think my whole career I've found building things fun. You know, originally that's why I was looking at mechanical engineering. And when I found out you could build things out of software, you know, that's a lot easier. You can build a lot more stuff with software than you can if you have to, you know, handle a welding torch or whatever. And building companies is kind of the natural evolution out of building software. You know, if you're going to build something, you want to see it succeed in the marketplace, you need a company to go around it. And I think that's what drove me into it. It's that creative process is really fun. So software development is definitely a creative process, and I would argue that building a company around that is, you know, a tremendously creative and challenging and interesting process.
Absolutely. And so, you know, I think what I would like to do, to give a little more context, let's dive into BugSplat, and then we'll start going into these questions and conversations around, obviously, like fundraising. You know, Kate had a great conversation on that, and even building out that brand and experience. But let's dive into, you know, BugSplat. And what I love, the way that I love to ask these questions is, what problem did you see in the world that needed to be fixed?
So BugSplat grew out of a problem, no question about it. So we were supporting, you know, applications, mostly at that time, earlier in my career, they were applications that were installed on somebody else's PC. And the only feedback you got from those applications back in the day was when a customer called you up on the support line, or complained to their sales rep about something being wrong. You know, and often that was, you know, it didn't have the right feature set. But, you know, one of the worst things for a developer is when it's crashing and you don't know what's happening. So, you know, we would get crashes in our large application that we were supporting. This was you know, at a variety of companies, but the one I had been working at the time was Autodesk, where we were supporting a version of AutoCAD, a big complex program, and we had almost no insight as to how it behaved in the field. And Autodesk started on a big, long, expensive venture to improve that. And at the time I was watching that, I was imagining, oh, this is a product or a feature that should be available to all companies, not only billion-dollar corporations that have, you know, huge R&D staffs that can build it. So that was the beginning of the seeds for the idea for BugSplat, is let's provide a crash reporting solution that is self-service, can be used by, you know, very early stage companies at no cost, and provides a cheaper way to monitor what's happening to your application in the field. And so it's not only that we get a report of a crash, but at BugSplat, when that crash comes in, we can typically reconstitute the entire state of the application at the time the crash happened. So often, you don't even need to talk to the end user. a developer can look at what happened and say, oh, this isn't what I expected, I can fix it. So it dramatically decreases the time required to understand what's happening when an application crashes and to improve your application stability.
That's really, really interesting. And as you're describing that, I'm really thinking about, like, as you built it, walk us through a little bit of that, like, first product, the MVP, and then into like your really first, like, main go-to-market product.
Yeah, happy to. So that's one of the really unique things about BugSplat. So at this point in my career, I was managing development teams and not writing code anymore. And I got interested in BugSplat not only because it was an interesting problem, but because I felt the need to do some kind of programming. I couldn't do it in my day job. I was too busy with other tasks. And so BugSplat started off for me as a hobby, something that I would work on in nights and weekends. And it, in the early days, it had just a handful of customers. And it was something that I did, for fun. And that evolved over a number of years into something where the small number of customers were really beginning to rely on it. And so it needed to be something more than just me on the evenings and weekends. And so eventually we ramped up and added, a bigger staff so that we had full-time coverage. And then eventually I became full-time in the business. But for years, it was my hobby that ran in the background.
Very interesting, very interesting. And, so Kate, I'm going to let get ready. If you would like to, give a little context to your question, take yourself off mute, and I would like to bring you in here. But I'm going to tee this up by saying that, you described going from product development and really getting that started to, at some point, you're going to ramp up. I'm not sure if you raised money, and we can talk about that in a second. But Kate, you have a question for Dave that I want to have you give a little more context.
Sure. So it's nice to see you in the development arena, and I've certainly spent some time. I spent some time there, but I ended up getting back into physical products a lot just because I learned so much about green economy and commerce. Mm-hmm. that I kept getting pulled back out. But what I would say is that when you have a solid product, right, you've put those years in, you've put that time in, and I am now at that point. I'm at 15 years of one end of product development and 5 or 6 years of another, and then they're both very good. I have raised some money. I've probably raised about 20,000, which, isn't nothing, but, it's certainly been spent on different ends of it. I'm actually talking to people about, like, the path from crowdfunding to Series A right now in different arenas. So what I would say is that even if it's just like one sentence or one word of advice for somebody who's in that position, I want to take note and write it down, since you've obviously blazed part of the path before, and this is really my first time going from. I've had a few product placements in a few boutique stores, but nothing like, okay, people are going to have a lot of eyes on what I'm doing.
So I'm not sure I feel like I'm particularly good at offering advice for physical goods, but I can tell you, from my perspective, and this is much more of a software development slant, is that people that I mentor are always, or not always, very often interested in raising Series A, raising money. And the perspective I have, I have been in a company that raised 25 million. I was a founder and co-founder in a company that raised $25 million of VC. I've also been in 2 other companies where we bootstrapped and raised, almost nothing, or, raised money from customers. And if you can find a path to not raising significant money, you have a lot more flexibility and options down the road.
I got it.
So just off the top of my head to you, I would say, well, you have a distribution problem. I'd go see if you could find somebody that would sell it for you as a distributor, as opposed to raising money and trying to build that channel yourself. But
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to definitely think on that because I've got more than one thing going. I'm going to look at distribution, and if all of that and money and attention is for another business, then I will definitely let that go. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes, great question, Kate. And we might even bounce back into some more of those questions around funding or angles of that. But what I would like to do is swing back into BugSplat has it's a very interesting name. It's a very interesting brand, and I'm a firm believer that definitely in the industries that can be very busy and very competitive, having a name and a brand that people can quickly remember and identify is very, very important. So let's talk a little bit more about that. How did you go about naming the company and building out this unique brand experience that seems to be doing well in the market?
So I totally buy your premise. I think the identity of the company is tied very closely to the name of the product or the company. And we spent a long time before we wrote any code, even, or before we really had a commercial product, at least, talking about the name and the branding. And we wanted a fun identity, something that, developers would enjoy imagining that they might be part of. And we just did a whole bunch of brainstorming with other folks that I knew that had built companies, and we whittled it down to a short list. And the final name was chosen sitting on a speedboat on a lake in New Hampshire. we were batting around a bunch, and we finally decided that we could do a whole lot with BugSplat. That was going to be what it was. And we didn't have a marketing budget. We didn't actually ever spend significant money in marketing at all, but we always believed that brand identity and the name was very important and part of who we wanted to be. And so that was the first thing. I totally buy it. You got to have a good, solid beginning, and then you want to build on it. So whatever you choose, you want to develop your brand around that and develop the identity. So that's a couple things for BugSplat. One is, we ask our customers to help us be a little bit visible. So we're a B2B play. We are technology embedded in somebody else's product. And yet when a crash happens, virtually all the time, the dialogue that comes up has some mention of us as, powered by BugSplat, or this is a BugSplat. And that's been really successful for us. At many places, end users don't call it a crash. They'll call it, oh, I got a bug splat, or oh, I got a splat. And that's been really, really valuable. That helps drive that brand awareness. And even though those end users aren't typically our customers, they talk with other people that build products, and there's definitely some brand awareness out there.
I love that. That's a great story. And I think that can be viewed as how can you create your brand into a verb and or adjective, right? And as that experience grows and your reach grows and the usage grows, that's the goal of a company, is to have their customers describe those things using the brand name. So that's so cool. Ty has a question. So Ty, if you would like to unmute yourself and at least give some perspective here on the question, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Nick. So my question comes from me as a developer who kind of just gets inherently the usefulness of a software like BugSplat, but I'd imagine the people bringing out the credit cards and buying the software aren't developers themselves. So what have you learned about positioning the value of BugSplat to the people who might not be using it?
It's a great question, and you're absolutely right that the first person that gets interested in BugSplat at a company is typically, somebody that's got a leadership position in QA, or perhaps a developer that's, seeing the inefficiencies of how to do this stuff. And you have to be able to make it easy for them to go through the buying process. So, this isn't any magic sauce that's specific to BugSplat. You start with something that lets them experience the full product at no cost. So You know, virtually all of our customers start out that way. They can self-serve to create an account. They can receive the entire experience of BugSplat for, you know, during the trial period, which is typically 30 days. And they can invite the rest of their team members in. So one of the cool things about BugSplat is you don't have to be a developer to be interested in what's showing up there, right? You as a manager or the leader of the company is interested in application stability, and you can come in there and find meaningful stuff, because not only do we analyze a crash and show you the call stack, but we show you trends over time. We show you customer comments when they get a crash. You know, we can show you the difference in stability between one version and another. Those are interesting to the wider group. So that would be my answer, is you want something that's easy to consume and provides value to the larger group, so that when you get to the guy that has the credit card, they understand why they're spending money.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another good question. Thank you, Ty. So Dave, I always like to ask this question as well, which is, you know, especially as you got started and, you know, the company was getting off the ground, you'd figured out brand name. All right, BugSplat, here we go. What would you say was like the biggest obstacle that the team and maybe even yourself encountered? And then how did you get through that? How did you overcome that obstacle? Clearly there's, you know, hundreds of these, but is there one that stood out that you're like, man, that was like the kind of a big thing and we finally figured out how to get through it?
I can think of two that come to the top of the list for me.
Let's go with two. Yeah.
So the first one could be a recurring theme that we'll talk about later, is that BugSplat has never raised any money. We've always grown organically. And so in a business like that, you gotta be willing to put in extra time and figure out how you're gonna feed yourself and your family while the business is growing. And that can be difficult. And at BugSplat, we had people that came in that started to help and then didn't stick with it. And at one point, I was there by myself. I was trying to run the business all alone, and that was probably the darkest hour for me. It's like we weren't quite big enough to hire full-time staff, and it was too much for me by myself. So at that point, I got a partner, gave him a big chunk of the business, and it was my brother. And he really rescued the company, because I needed somebody else. It was just too much for one guy. So, and that's been a recurring theme for me as a mentor. It's like, you don't want to be in this by yourself. You want founders that have the same skin in the game, that will help you make it through the rough patches. So that's one. And I think I actually hit the two that I had. The two are, don't go it alone. And the other one is, when you're bootstrapping, that you have to be able to figure out how to get through the lean times. And there are rewards for being able to get through that. But when you're a really small company working at midnight by yourself, it can be hard to see them.
Man, I can tell you what, I got 5 different question directions that I want to go right now at the same time, by the way. But I think the one I'm gonna go with is okay. Question 1 is gonna be essentially like personal time versus basically like making sure that you have, it's not 50-50 balance, but there's like, how do you keep sane in those times? And then I think the second one that I'm going to follow up with at some point is around, the building of that team and, finding that early co-founder or further team. But let's go with when people might be on the call and listening on this conversation right now that are in that position of, all right, I got something, we're working on it, I'm building it, but we don't have the capital yet. Maybe we haven't raised it. And so, they might need to balance, support their life in one way or another in maybe external ways outside of the company, because it's not growing revenue yet. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how did you personally just not burn the candle at both ends?
That's always a challenge,
Right.
especially when you're a husband and a father as well.
Yeah.
You know, you got to figure out a balance that works for everybody. Um, and you know, everybody has challenges in that area. You know, that's a tough balance to hit. And I would say, you know, my advice is if you're not happy in your home life and your personal life, then it's unlikely that your business is going to provide you that happiness. So you have to get that right. I'm sorry, was there a follow up there? So that's the work-life balance piece. Did you want to go into the how do you find the partners?
Not yet, because
Okay.
I would add to what you're saying, which is, you know, I think just everyone listening, that statement is very, very important. If you take away anything, is do not let go or lose sight of your personal, you know, fulfillment and happiness for the sake of just more hours, working till midnight every night, thinking that it's going to get better. And you know, I'm guilty of the same thing, and you know, it's not easy as a founder. And I would simply say this, that this is counter to everything that you read about, you know, startup hustle and all that, but you have some time. Like, you, it's okay to take the appropriate amount of time in years to build the right company and the right product in the right timing in the right way, right? And so Dave, you know, like
It's
you, it sounds like this has been a bit of a process, but by getting those things right and understanding, like, if you're struggling in one way or another, you can slow down, because if you have a right vision and you have the vision that you want to achieve, it just might take a few more years. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. The saying that comes to mind for me is it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to sprint through it. Maybe some companies, rare companies do. My experience has been, you know, you have to have something that is maintainable and sustainable. And, you know, like I said before, I've seen this in a number of places where if your home or personal life falls apart, it's going to drag down your professional life too. You got to have that right.
All right. So, and you know, by the way, everyone, more questions in the if there's more questions in the chat box, we'll definitely pull them in. But let's talk about now. You mentioned surrounding yourself with the team and the people, and you know, your brother came on, but let's even go with you know, even, how did you approach, as you know, at some point it can't just be two people, so how did you start looking at, all right, we're going to start adding some more team members here? Were they co-founders or were they early employees? And then how did you go about, because that first, you know, going from like one or two founders to then an early team that is broken up into, like, you know, the responsibilities and the areas, like, that's not easy to start laying that framework down. How did you go about bringing that early team in and determining what needed to be done?
So that's one of the great benefits of building your own company or building your own team is you get to choose the people you work with, you know, and oh my gosh, that makes the biggest difference in the world. If you like the people you're working with and you respect them and trust them, going to work every day is easy. And it can be really painful, you know, if you don't have that right. So first on the ownership of the company thing, is when you look for somebody to be a founder, I think it's important to be generous with what you give them so that they feel like they have a meaningful stake in the business. And it's vitally important to know how they become an unfounded person. How you get in and how you get out is very important to structure. And that's advice I give to almost every really young company that I talk to as a mentor. And it's amazing how many people don't think about that up front. But it's critical, and it's what has allowed, you know, BugSplat has gone through several different founders who have elected to leave the business, and there haven't been any injured feelings because everybody knew the right expectations up front and what was going to happen at the end. So that's
I,
critical advice.
I love how you say, you know, how you get in, how you get out. And could you give an example of at least a structure, like the conversation around, because basically it's like, look, you know, not everyone is like in it for 10, 20 years and yet they want to add value. So how would, what are some thought processes on bringing in a co-founder that you are then talking with them saying, yeah, this might be a shorter period of time, but they're going to give really good energy and value for that time. How do you structure that?
Well, a lot of it is dependent upon the structure of the company. You know, if you're a C corp and you can give shares of ownership and people can own them long term, then you know that's kind of easy. In a smaller company, you might have owners that just own some percentage of it, and when they might have to buy in if there's value in the company, and let's say your shares are worth X, they might have to buy in. That's never happened at BugSplat, but you could absolutely imagine that in a small company that was generating revenue. But however they get in, whether they're given a percentage or buying in, they need to understand what would trigger them being bought out and what the valuation would be, or at least what the process to establish the valuation would be when they leave. And so, at BugSplat in the very early days, the equation was, well, if you're not involved in the company, and in the early days, that meant spending nights and weekends. Nobody was getting paid. And you got to own the company as long as you kept participating in it. But if you didn't participate in it, you were no longer going to be an owner. And that was pretty easy, but you had to put parameters about what those things meant, and so that people weren't surprised when they were said, well, hey, you're no longer active. Guess what?
Quick follow-up question on that, and then Sherry, get ready, and if you would like to add some context. But my follow-up question is, in your definition, what was inactivity? Because the parameters are key, but you want to be clear to the individuals on the team that at some point, if you're not putting X in or delivering X in X time, Y time, that qualifies as inactivity. So what would that be for you?
I forget in those early days what the actual parameter was. We had some words written around how much effort, how many hours you were spending, or what you were doing with the company. But in practice, the way that worked with our early owners was, it was just a conversation. It was like, hey, looks like you've lost interest here. Haven't seen you for a couple months. It's time to trigger this. And the answer was, yeah, you're right. So the fact that you had that process defined up front made the actual conversation easy.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's just a matter of, so any, people on here listening and you're leading a team, just, make those clear parameters, and then having those, it's one-on-one conversation sometimes with those individuals. And most of the time, look, they might not, so there might be a period where they kind of feel bad, but if you address it, everyone's going to feel okay to at least say, hey, what is the situation here? And if they need to leave, then it's probably healthy to talk about that and get that out of the way. Very good. So Sherry has a question, and her mic is not working or something. So I will describe it. And this is a really interesting question around, how did you actually, approach your brother for that help, and how did you bridge that conversation to say, you know what, like, would you want to join, or did he approach you, or